Good evening, everyone. My name is Karanbir Singh. I'm a program manager on the Windows Identity team. Welcome to Microsoft's guide for going passwordless. Over the next 60 minutes or so, what I hope to achieve today is just talk about why do we want to go passwordless. I think looking by the sheer audience in this room, I'll spend very little time on that. More importantly, I want to spend time on our strategy, the way Microsoft has been thinking about how we want to address the issue of passwords holistically once and for all. What is the strategy that we ourselves are using to create the technology necessary and the tools necessary to then enable our partners, our customers, and our consumers and users to go passwordless? I want to touch upon that strategy, but more importantly, talk about the technology that exists today and hopefully draw a mapping of those pieces of features and technologies that you've heard of and you've gone to many sessions over the course of this conference, and how they map back to that strategy so that you can take a full holistic look. Talk about a little on what's coming, but more importantly, show you a couple of cool demos. What I really hope you walk away with is deep understanding of Microsoft's commitment to this mission of creating a world without passwords. We are all in. We really want to make this happen. We can't do it alone. We want you to come along with us on this journey. I want to talk about the other thing I want you to walk away with today, hopefully, is a clear strategy and next steps for you to send out that email on Monday when you're back in your offices to your IT counterparts on what are you going to go do next. That's it. So let's start. I'm actually not going to spend too much time on how we're living in turbulent times. Yes, identity protection is the need of the hour. Millions and millions and millions of accounts get compromised on an annual basis that lead to a lot of money eventually being lost and IP being lost. And it takes a really long time before we even discover that such breaches have occurred. Right? As a matter of fact, I want to say safely, half of you guys, about a few weeks ago, were impacted as well. Now, not all of these attacks stem from passwords, but there's a large percentage, over 63% of all attacks out there at some point originate from the fact that passwords were being used, either they were phished, scratched, breached. So nobody likes passwords, right? Anyone here? I actually want to see or hear boos if you if you like passwords. Anyone who likes passwords? No. Who hates passwords? Can we hear boos, please? All right. I just wanted to do this especially because people who were watching this video, there was a whole auditorium of people who just went boo. That's awesome. No one likes passwords, right? The point of this slide is passwords come with cognitive load that we put our users under. Remembering them, creating them, typing them is hard. And obviously, we want people to create the most strong passwords that, they can still remember. Well, if they create a very hard one, they can't remember too many of them, and therefore they end up using the same ones, right? Obviously, all of us have touch devices now. Your PCs are touch. Your mobile devices are, of course, touch. Entering passwords on those, I fat finger them all the time. So clearly, the modern form factors weren't really designed keeping passwords in mind to begin with. Because we have on average, over 30 accounts per individual that stem from your corporate accounts to your personal accounts to all the various things that you do in your lives, we end up reusing passwords all the time. And oftentimes, you use one secure password and one not so secure password, and that's what you do everywhere. And now, if any of the websites that were perhaps not top-grade security get breached and those accounts get compromised, the same username and password lists available on the black market for really cheap that attackers go buy and then replay them against all resources that they really want to go after. And even the strongest passwords, you can go to town and write an essay as your password. It's still phishable at the end of the day because it's very easy to create a social engineering attack where I can just have you re-enter that password and log it and then use it. Passwords are bad. It's not just the cognitive load on users that's bad, it's how much they cost us. As IT, many of you in this room are aware, having to deal with passwords is very expensive. Just to give you an example, like this is very close to our heart. So these are numbers from our identity system, Microsoft accounts. We've got about 800 million accounts. Over the last month alone, about roughly 10%, that is 686,000 users had to go and reset their passwords because they forgot them. And these are not the automated flows. These are the flows that actually made it to a help desk call. And that, in general, cost us, well, upwards of $12 million in just 1 month because of forgotten passwords. So, as you can tell, we are very, very incentivized to fixing this problem, and we know that we are not the only ones who share this concern. All of the people in this room, at some level, are experiencing the same costs. So what do we want to do? Now, nobody likes passwords. We're moving towards a place where two-factor authentication is actually becoming very mainstream. It's really great. It's much better than passwords from a security point of view, where your password is not the only secret that you use. You have something else that you add on top and use. Now, this is great from a security point of view, but it does come at the cost of usability. Pulling out your phone every time and entering that code can get old very quickly, and especially given the number of apps and services and devices you experience those on. It's not the best experience. So, the way we really think about it is obviously the quintessential balancing usability with security. Passwords are neither secure nor that usable. When we add TFA on top of it, with two-factor authentication, we do up the security posture, but at the same time, we do lose a little bit in terms of the usability. So what we're really shooting for at the end of the day is something in the upper right quadrant, right? That's something that's usable as well as it's secure at the same time. And that's what is going to become a worthy replacement for passwords that we will use. A couple of very other interesting things that I want to highlight about passwords too. So we always talk about all the things that are bad with passwords, right? They're insecure, inconvenient, expensive to maintain. There are a couple of things that are actually pretty good about passwords too, that we just have to acknowledge. And interestingly enough, whenever we talk passwordless technologies, it's these benefits of passwords that actually become the roadblock. Passwords are compatible. They work everywhere, down level, regardless of the ecosystem you're on. And they're very easy to provision for the most part. Might not be very easy to maintain over a period of time. But the reason I bring up this particular slide is that we need to really understand the good and the bad with passwords if we are ever to create a technology that's worthy of being deemed a passwordless replacement, a password replacement. So what does passwordless mean, right? We want to go passwordless, of course. So let's define what that means for us before we start on that journey. A couple of things. The first, a user promise. Let's get rid of the cognitive load that I was referring to. Let's create a world where end users never have to deal with passwords in their day-to-day lives. The entire life cycle, from being able to pick up or establish a new account or set up a new device, get into that device, unlock it, access apps and resources all over the place, and eventually, even if you get stuck, let's say you forgot your PIN or your biometric stops working, that the entire workflow can exist and thrive without ever needing passwords. Let's create a world where users don't think about passwords anymore. And secondly, for the security nerds in this audience, which is very important, which is let's make sure that the user credential we replace passwords with has certain properties, the shortcomings of passwords, right? That the replacement credential cannot be cracked, cannot be breached, cannot be phished. All right, so how are we as Microsoft thinking about it? And this is important. The reason I'm sharing this with you is that you'll start to appreciate the features that we talk about, the various investments that we make as a company, and how they go back and map to the strategy. And then, after you have the strategy in place, you can devise your own going to passwordless strategy for that meets the best needs in your particular enterprise. So first, basic. Let's develop a password replacement offering, right? If we are to go passwordless, we need to have something that replaces them. Let's make sure it actually works across the board and does justice to these use cases that passwords have so far been used for. Number two, let's get to a place where we reduce user-visible password surface area. Long-winded way of saying, let's upgrade all the use cases, all of our tech, all of our apps, the OS people, our users are using, to not requiring password. Let's just wipe passwords off, right? And that can only happen if we do a bunch of work using the password replacement technology and making sure that those use cases are still enabled, but they just don't need passwords anymore. Third thing we got to do is make sure that there is a way and tools possible to transition into a world where you can simulate that we have in fact gone passwordless. What I mean by that is, if 1 and 2 have happened correctly, the number 3 is something as basic as literally hiding all existence of passwords, maybe in a pilot program, converting known users' passwords to a 128-bit machine-generated password. Right? Create a world where if users aren't using them, none of our apps or services are using them, well, let's make them really long that simulate this world that we want to go towards. This is really to make sure that we're ready to truly go passwordless, right? We can't just go all the way, not making sure that we've done our due diligence. And the final step is, of course, eliminating passwords from the identity directory altogether. So this is the 4-step process and the strategy that we have created for ourselves. And as we make future investments, or even the investments that we have currently out in our product portfolio already, how we think about them, and are we doing justice to all these 3? Because it's this entire set that needs to be done end-to-end if we ever want to be able to truly deliver on that promise that we were talking about of going passwordless. So as you can tell, if we do the first 3, we get to a place where users aren't dealing with passwords anymore because they have something else that's better and it works everywhere and they like using it. And finally, if that works the way we want to, when we get rid of the passwords from the identity directory, we've also gone ahead and achieved our full security promise. So now I want to talk about what's available today, right? In the first section, you guys have heard about Windows Hello for Business. And if some of you might have attended a session on Tuesday where we talked about saying goodbye to passwords and how Authenticator app exists. So I want to deep dive into these 2 technologies a little bit and kind of talk to how these are in line with the characteristics that we expect from our passwordless technologies, right? So before I go in, just quick show of hands. How many in this room can actually tell the difference or explain why pins, a Windows Hello pin, is better than a password? I don't see a lot of hands. I see a few hands. So this is why I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Windows Hello. And I know most of you guys think Windows Hello is just using biometrics, face recognition, a fingerprint, and voila, you're able to unlock your PC. But there's a whole second half of Windows Hello that makes it the security promise we want to go deliver. And this, hopefully, with this intro, all of you should be able to answer why pins are better than passwords. Right? If the next 2 slides don't do that, please stop me. Let's spend some time doing that. Because the number of people we've actually talked to who love Windows Hello, but don't truly know the sort of the tech underneath that makes it amazing from a security point of view. So Windows Hello fundamentally is a asymmetric key pair authentication model. I'll go slow. Passwords, right, are symmetric shared secrets. You create a username and password. When you're trying to log in, the hash of that password goes over the wire to an identity provider. The identity provider looks at your username, finds out the hash that it has stored, matches the hash that came from the wire, and says, cool, it matches, you are who you say you are. Now that's bad because if somehow I can get my hands on that hash or that password, I could be sitting in my basement pretending to be you. Why? Because the way you prove yourself to this identity provider by sending a username and password hash is exactly how I'm going to do it too. So from the authority's point of view, they don't know the difference. right? So this is a nuanced characteristic of passwords. Now, with Windows Hello, what we've really done is we have gone away from the shared secret topology to an asymmetric key-based topology. So what really ends up happening is, I'll actually have a couple of slides that go into the details, but fundamentally think there's a PKI dance that happens between the user's device and the user and the identity provider, one that is unspoofable. Let's take a deeper dive. So this is just an example of what Windows Hello does in the background when you're setting up or signing in and creating a Windows Hello pin or a bio gesture, right? So you start off with creating a biometric gesture, right? You say, all right, I want to enroll my face on a Windows PC, and that's how you start. What happens after that is you use your password, some form of multi-factor authentication to initially prove to the identity provider who you are. But at that point, what ends up happening after that is Windows goes and creates a private and public key pair. It stores that private key on let's say, a secure module like TPM, and protects it with this biometric gesture or pin that you've created, right? So think you authenticate, Windows generates a private key and a public key, stores the private key on a TPM, and then the only way you can unlock that private key is by the use of this pin or the biometric gesture, right? What happens next is, so then Windows, once this private public key pair has been generated, also constructs an attestation blob that has a bunch of information about who the user is, the health state of the device, and all that good stuff, signs it with the private key, and then sends that authentication, that attestation blob, which is signed, with the public key to the identity provider. And the identity provider then uses the public key, decrypts that blob that came, and says, all right, I think we can talk. And at that point, what it does is it registers you as a user in its backend, comes up with a key ID that's uniquely bound to you as a user in your device, right? So this whole thing happens. You create a bio gesture, private public key pair, private key is stored on the device. The only way that gets unlocked is by PIN or fingerprint. Using this, you establish a relationship with the identity provider. That's what's happening under the hood when you're really just swiping to get Windows Hello set up. Let's talk about what happens now when you want to use Windows Hello for the purposes of sign-in or authentication, right? So the way this whole dance really happens is a device, let's say you want to sign in, says, all right, I want to authenticate to, for example, Azure AD or ADFS, right? So it sends a hello signal to the identity provider with a key ID, perhaps, right? Because this is now the way this device and user identifies itself with Azure AD. Azure says, all right, well, I'm going to send you a nonce. Can you please sign it with your private key? So then, in order for that to happen on the device side, the user swipes or unlocks with a PIN, such that the TPM then says, all right, here's the private key, that nonce that just was returned by the identity provider, sign it, and then send it back. Of course, on the flip side, identity provider uses the key ID, looks up your public key, and this encrypted nonce that was returned decrypts it and says, all right, I know who you are now, because you've proved to me, because only you could have signed this nonce with your private key, because you were the only one who had it. Now, coming back to the original question of why is PIN better than password? It's better than password is because pins are local. They don't travel. Because what pins are being used for is unlocking a private key that only exists on the device you're using that pin on, right? Now, so what that really means is, if I was using my PC and you shoulder surfed my pin, you can't go home on your PC in your basement, type in my username, and then use my PIN to log in. What is it going to unlock? That private key only exists on my machine. So now you're going to have to steal my machine and my fingerprint or bio in order to unlock that. So this is the basic reason why Windows Hello pins are better than passwords. All right, gonna ask this question again. How many people now know the difference between PIN and passwords and why PINs are better? Show of hands. All right, many more hands. I'm glad. Please talk to your friends and communicate the same difference. It's very, very important. Of course, there's a second aspect to it. And let me see if I can project that better. All right, which is the fun part, which is how you use this technology. A lot of words, but fairly straightforward when it comes to using it.
Hello?
Hi, Mom.
Graduating tomorrow.
Oh my gosh, I know.
I got it.
Awesome. Now, Windows Hello is real, and it exists. This slide, I like showing it because we've been at this problem for a while, and we came out with Windows Hello as our first step towards eradicating passwords once and for all. A lot of our enterprise customers have actually embraced that and loved the idea and have started actually deploying it. We've got we checked, over 35 million or close to 37 million active users who are using Windows Hello on a daily basis. We've got over 200 enterprises that have deployed Windows Hello and a lot more in the pipeline. Some of the largest enterprises outside of Microsoft actually is one where they have 25,000 active, more than 25,000 active Windows Hello users. So the reason I want to put up this slide is because if you think Windows Hello is not enterprise grade just yet, it is, and it is available today. And it's one of those unique solutions that very seldom in the space of security where we can say, we've delivered consumer grade user experience and married it with enterprise grade security. There are very few things we can say that. So I highly recommend that please try it out and see how it can fit in your enterprise and be deployed. So moving on, a lot of new things have actually happened that I just want to touch upon, and this is just an update from this past year. We did actually a dedicated session that goes into the details of what all has happened in the world of Windows Hello and what's new, but just some of the highlights. We have worked and heard from a lot of our customers who've tried deploying Windows, and we've made deployment simpler. We've added support for on-prem only. We've also heard that sometimes SCCM gets in the way and can we deploy Windows Hello without it. We've worked very hard on improving the overall user experience. Of course, sign-in was always great, but there were some auxiliary tasks that every now and then, let's say people forgot their PIN because they were using their BIOS so much. And then there was no way to really reset your PIN from a locked portal, from a locked screen. And so we've made things like remote PIN reset or self-service PIN reset from the lock screen now possible. It's sort of a very awesome evil that we had to go fix. Face recognition and fingerprint became so popular that people stopped remembering their PINs. Kind of cool, actually. And then we've also enabled a bunch of new scenarios, again, based on your feedback. These scenarios sort of fundamentally, so we're embracing how we started with Windows Hello, which was a more human way to authenticate. And with, last time when we launched it, we said, you are the credential. We expanded on the Windows Hello family by bringing on the companion devices framework, where devices on you could also participate in the Windows Hello action. Now we're beginning, push the envelope and are trying to figure out, are there ways in which we can go beyond just you and the devices you have and also start consuming all the various devices and their capabilities and sensors, your behavioral patterns around how you interact with those, and eventually, sorry, I'm going to grab a quick drink. Can we also embrace behavioral patterns and combine all of these, even sometimes weak signals, to create a very high level of assurance and hopefully make it such that our products and services could make better trust decisions. So I did a session that talked about how we were thinking about extending Windows Hello with trusted signals. I highly recommend you guys check it out. So moving on. Now, phase 2. We also announced Microsoft Authenticator app. How many of you actually have this app installed on your phones? Awesome. Those of you who don't know what that is, not right now, but right after this session, please download this application. What this application lets you do is use your phone and the app on it to use it as an authenticator mechanism, right? And by the way, when you download this application and set it up, the same private-public key dance that I was referring to earlier also happens when you're setting this app up. So even when this app's really being used as an authenticator, and I'll give you a couple examples of how it can be used, it's using the same strong authentication technologies behind it. All right. I actually want to give you a demo and then talk about this. So can we switch over to my demo machine, please? All right, so here I have a machine. I imagine you went to Best Buy, and you picked up a brand new Windows 10 machine, and you're excited to get it all set up. Many of you in this room have already set up your Authenticator app. So let's see what that experience looks like. All right, I'm going to choose the keyboard layout. Supposed to ask me if I want to add another keyboard. Let me start this once again while I do that. So I'm going to quickly reset my VM, get it back to the state so that we can actually go through out-of-the-box experience all over again. And hopefully, this time, I'm connected to the network, so all should work fine. All right, let's do this again. Now, one of the things I wanted to do was actually show you both my phone and the out-of-the-box experience side by side. But unfortunately, we couldn't really hook it up that way, so I'm going to go back and forth between my phone and the experience here on the screen. All right. I don't want to add a keyboard. At this point, it's actually going to ask me, how do I want to connect this PC, and what am I really setting this up for? Let me make sure that I'm actually connected to a network. I'll give it another go. If it doesn't work, I'm going to switch to slides, but come back to this demo if it actually can come back. Turn off. Boot this PC again. So I've been having network issues all day long, especially I'm sure if you guys have actually set up VMs, you know how the virtual network setup sometimes goes pretty flaky if you're trying to switch between networks. All right, so while that actually fires up, if I could go back to my slides, because this can happen every once in a while, I did have some backup slides that I could use in the meantime. So if you could go back to my deck, please. Thank you. So the same screen, so I'm going to go through click through while I'm trying to set up this VM and see if it actually boots back up and is able to connect. But same screens, out-of-the-box experience. I go through some of the basic screens that I'm asked. I choose the keyboard layout, eventually connect to a network. If you're actually not on a VM, you can make this happen. Go through some of the existing screens. Now, here's where the action truly starts. I enter my UPN. That is my username. And as soon as I do that, because I have Authenticator set up, there's a notification that goes on my phone. And when I unlock my phone, I am asked to match the sessions, right? This is just to make sure, because this request is coming from a PC that my account has never seen before. So it says something as basic as, hey, do you see the digits on the screen right now on your PC? And can you pick one of those digits on your phone as well, just to match the session? And from there, once I've done that, I can just use my Touch ID in this case, bio, to approve this session, and that lets me go through. Now, if I were on a phone that wasn't capable of doing bio, in that case, I would have just entered my PIN. Now, this is the classic on my phone. That's where my authenticator really is. So my key is on the secure enclave, the private key that is. So it's something I have, and in order to unlock that key, I'm going to either enter my PIN, which is the something I know, or use my bio, which is the something I am. So I'm doing two-factor authentication and approving this session, and then I get on to the next step, which is Windows asks me to set up Windows Hello. Now, if I'm on a device that's capable of doing face recognition, that's the experience that I'm asked to do. So I enroll into face, and then set up a PIN, and go on to my desktop. Now, I'm going to quickly see if I can make this work once again, and if not, we'll just go on. Yeah, well, the internet is actually not helping. So if you could just go back to the slides, we'll keep on going. I do have this, I want to show this really bad, and I'll come up with other creative ways to show it to you. But the reason we wanted to demo this was, if you attended the other session where we talked about going passwordless, we used the Authenticator app as a way to log into a browser session, right? You could go into your Ignite portal and say, I want to sign in with Microsoft account, and there was a notification that came on your phone. You could approve that right there, and you were able to log in. This is another incarnation and a new vertical being lit up, but really powered by the same technology. But what you were able to do was take a brand new PC, set it up, and get to your desktop, be signed in. And by the way, you've not entered your password so far. Pretty cool. Moving on now. You know, we all love identity, but in a lot of ways, identity is just a means to an end, not the end, right? Accessing resources and being able to do the work you want to do is really where it's all at. Setting up accounts is great, but it's what those accounts eventually let you do. So this is where part 2 really comes in. And this is a very, very important step of the overall journey to going passwordless. This is what we've done with Windows Hello for Business is we've enabled all primary Windows scenarios and other scenarios that can work now with using Windows Hello alone. It doesn't need passwords anymore. We've enlightened all of our inbox applications to upgrade themselves to modern authentication libraries such that they can deliver a very good single sign-on experience using the strong identity that you just used to unlock your PC. And then, obviously, we've made it such that these same libraries are available to you and your app developers such that they can be consumed in your line of business applications, and they can be upgraded so that they can deliver the exact same seamless experience that all of the inbox applications can. So I want to show you that demo real quick. So let's go back to my demo machine, please. So first of all, start off with, now imagine that I actually went through Ubi and set it up, and my Windows Hello was set up. The first experience is really how seamless it is to unlock this PC using Windows Hello, right? So I was able to unlock this PC, no passwords required so far. Now, basic things like launching any of the applications, you'll notice that this application is already signed in with my identity. I didn't really do anything other than unlock my PC using my face. That goes on. I can keep on launching more applications. We've actually, all of these applications are using the same authentication APIs that are now available to you for you to use too. This demo that we used for registering at Ignite, this is a portal I'm sure all of you guys are actually using quite frequently. Let's try that again. All right. And now if I were to log in, you're clicking on the Microsoft account tab, right? So let's see what happens this time, and I'll click on that same tab. I'll click on it, Because I used hello to unlock this PC, that authentication, that seamless single sign-on was actually carried through all the way to the apps and resources and web apps that I use. Isn't that powerful? So literally, all I did was use my phone once to bootstrap my identity, set up Windows Hello on this device, and from there on out, I'm just going to use it across the board seamlessly within my web apps and my applications. If I could switch back to the slide deck, please. I heard a question. Can we maybe take that question after the session? I'll be sure to answer it. Can we go back to the deck, please? Thank you. So moving on, now how did this really work? We want to kind of give you a glance into the tech that made this happen, that seamless experience of being able to unlock the PC and then launching all apps wherever, including your Office apps, LOBs, and web apps. How did that whole thing just work? We introduced authentication, a modern authentication infrastructure in Windows called the Web Account Manager. At a very high level, there are a few players involved in this whole flow. There's an app that wants to be able to connect to a resource. There's the cloud, where the identity provider and the resource, just one cloud for this example. And then a identity provider that's available on Windows, which is just an inbox component in our case. And this framework is actually extensible. So you can author your own identity provider apps and also have them be deployed to Windows. And so what ends up happening is this app says, hey, Web Account Manager, can I get a token so that I can talk to the cloud? This token request goes to the account provider. In this case, Azure AD, Microsoft account, ADFS, and asks for a token back. Now, the account provider says, all right, I can get you this token. I have to ask my cloud so that I can get you the access token you need. Now, the magic is that because I unlocked my PC with Windows Hello, we've hooked up the way you're unlocking that PC with this entity, and the two talk and have a trust relationship. And therefore, that authentication, the artifacts are transferred over to this entity, and it can actually sign you on. Had we not done that, then this would have prompted you. But this gets you a token back. Once you have this token, this goes back to the application, and then the application uses that to access resources. Now, the reason I'm spending time talking about the importance of this is, let's say tomorrow you deploy Windows Hello. The biggest roadblock is going to be all of your workflows, existing workflows, that still have inherent dependencies on passwords in some way, shape, or form, because they were just authored at a time where modern authentication technologies weren't available. So we have Web Account Manager. We have lots of rich authentication libraries that you can use to take your LOBs that work today with username and password and update them so that they start to work with modern technologies and kind of stay true and stand the test of time as we keep on adding new things, and they'll keep on working. So this is something I definitely highly recommend you take attention to. And there are a couple of very good sessions on this, and there are many others that we've done in the past that really talk to all the details of what it takes to take an application that was written back in the day and transform it in a very easy way. All right, so that's reduction of the user visible password surface area, right? So far we've talked about let's deploy Windows Hello and authenticate our app, and these are a couple of things that are password replacement techs. Second, all the resources, the way you can unlock PCs, access resources in the web or in applications, Win32 including. Now, the last couple of phases, right? There are a bunch of things here. But the fundamental idea, and I'm just going to maybe demo one of them, is that you can start simulating a world where you literally can hide passwords in a way where folks actually have to experience them. I'm going to give you a very quick demo of that, actually. Could we go back to my demo machine, please? Thank you. I'm going to lock this PC and actually not unlock it this time. I want to actually highlight something very interesting. You see the sign-in options? When I click on sign-in options, all I have as options are the Windows Hello factors that I've enrolled. It's my face or the PIN. We've hidden, and this particular PC is running a policy where it's possible for you to just hide password credential providers from enumerating on your lock screen, on your credential UI. And what this does is it starts that journey towards, if passwords were not a thing anymore, can my use cases, can my information workers still exist and actually not just exist, thrive and do their work without losing any productivity time? Can we go back to the deck, please? All right, so far you've heard our story of how we're thinking about the strategy, the things we've implemented. Your turn. What are some of the things you guys, like I said, that email on Monday that needs to go out to your IT departments, what does the generally feel to steal this slide and paste it in that email? But what can you do today? You can deploy passwordless replacement offerings. You can deploy Windows Hello. You can set up Authenticator app to start pilot programs today. As a matter of fact, Authenticator app can be used even in your Azure AD environment as a second factor. And we're working on making that a primary factor, very similar to how we've done for Microsoft accounts. Second, please, please, please upgrade your line of business applications to using modern authentication libraries. That's the only way they'll actually continue working in this passwordless world. In the process, you're also going to find some legacy workflows that are just inherently built on weak technology. They're built on passwords. You're going to have to figure out how to supplement those and circumvent those hurdles such that if you are to achieve this passwordless world, you're going to have to phase those things out. And you can start identifying those today. Then you can, like I said, something as basic as start a pilot program where you disable some of these settings. Password credential providers just don't show up. Take a few users you have and actually change their passwords to a 128-bit random character, alphanumeric string. The premise being that you did that, your users didn't know, and did anyone complain or not? That's an excellent way, and in a lot of ways, share a secret with you. This is how we're also thinking about what we're going to light up in the coming months as we go along. We have similar pilots running back home in Redmond, where a bunch of our friends and teams are doing this exact same thing. And this is how we are highlighting the shortcomings that we have in our products and let's say Windows or our apps. And we are identifying where things break, and then we are figuring out how to fix them. So we're doing our part. We want you guys to do the same. And this is really important because this is going to help you start getting ready for the passwordless migration. But at the same time, if you find certain gaps that, well, there are no bridges for, please bring them to our attention. Use the feedback tool or emails or just direct line of conversation to help us, first of all, realize these gaps that you have so that we can actually factor those into our own plans. Now, I kind of want to talk about just very briefly in terms of what's still coming. So I talked about the Authenticator app. We're working on bringing Azure AD support as a primary authenticator to the authentication app. So you can literally take that same phone app experience and set up your PC and go through, let's say, Azure AD joining your device, go through that entire flow, set up your Windows Hello, unlock that PC, and eventually go on to accessing your resources. A couple of the slides that I now realize I skipped initially when I was trying to show the demo were we are working very closely. We're board members of the FIDO Alliance. Now, this is an industry-wide consortium of over 100 companies that are working towards to really come up with a solution that eventually replaces password, the standard. And Windows Hello is an excellent example of what is possible. And so we're working very closely with our partners in the industry to light up this standard such that we can build a lot of these password replacement technologies in type. As you can tell now, Windows Hello is local to the machine. Now, what if you actually have use cases where, well, let's say a factory floor or a point of sales setup where you have a lot of workers who share the same set of machines, but no one really persists their account on any. We've got to come up with a portable credential offering. And that's where FIDO also helps us. And if there's a standard, then a lot of these devices, and you guys must have seen the demo we did with the YubiKey, which is a security device, USB-based, that has the same private key infrastructure on it. You can stick it into a PC and just tap it for presence detection or liveness detection, and then log in a secure way. And so we're going to keep on at it and bring a lot of these offerings. So the road to the way we're thinking about it is we understand that in order for you to go passwordless holistically, we've got to make sure that whatever it is that you deploy works ubiquitously. It can't just be a Windows play. It has to work on our other ecosystems as well. It can't just be a particular identity system. You live a life that goes across the board, and you transition from your personal to your work life many times within an hour sometimes, and that these password replacement technologies have to work. And that is what we are aspiring towards, and that's what our promise is to you. So just wanted to summarize once again. When you walk out today, please, if you want to go passwordless, there are certain tangible things that you can go do today. Deploy Windows Hello, upgrade your line of business applications, disable some of the password visible surface areas from your workflows, and eventually identify and phase out any of the things that don't really work. More importantly, last but not the least, please report gaps so we can address them. And stay tuned. We have a lot more in the pipeline that's coming. Thank you very much for being here, and I hope you guys enjoy the party later tonight. Thank you. So now I can take questions if anyone has some.
One question. Is it possible with Azure AD to have no password with Windows 7?
So the way we're developing the Authenticator app, it's actually agnostic of the OS. It's actually one of those plays that is agnostic to the operating system you're on. So if you have an Authenticator app, which is something we're working on with Azure AD, you could actually, you can carry out your workflows as long as you're using the right set of authentication libraries. So in the web or in your apps.
So
but
it's
yes.
possible to do.
The presentation of the OOBE,
Yes.
where you have only MFA. This was a live ID, not an Azure ID, or?
So the demo I was showing was with Microsoft accounts. So that's your Hotmail account or Outlook account. Currently, what we have in production right now for Azure AD is that you can use your Authenticator app as a second factor.
Exactly.
So we are currently working on lighting up that same experience that you saw for Microsoft accounts to also support Azure AD accounts. So you'd be able to just do the exact same thing and use your phone authenticator as the primary authenticator and just go through that authentication dance in a multi-factor auth way.
Is there something already a roadmap available where you say, okay, this is this year, next year?
We are working. So this is something that we aspire to deliver within the next year.
Second question, the disable of the password authentication on the logon screen.
Yes.
Is this 1709 or already possible?
These are already available registry values and policies that are available. There are two. One that lets you choose what credential providers you want enumerating on the sign-in options. And the second is, on the flip side, the Cred UI scenarios does the same. It enumerates all the credential providers that are active. So you can selectively choose to disable both or just one.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you for presentation. So let's see if we enable the Windows Hello and somebody goes to their mother's house using her PC. It doesn't have where you put your fingerprint.
I actually wanted to show that, and why don't I do that? Let me simulate that. Can we switch to my demo machine, please? So the way I'm going to do that is, let's say, create a new window in private. So assume that this was my mom's PC, and I actually wanted to go register to Ignite there, right? And all I have is her PC. So when I click on Microsoft accounts to log in, now this time, obviously, it doesn't know me. I've never been here before. And when I type in my UPN, as soon as I click next, so what I'm going to do is actually transfer to my phone.
50 minutes.
A notification goes to my phone. It is not showing up here. There you go. And so I can use my authentication app. On my screen is what I see. This is 38, so I choose the session on my phone as well. Once I've chosen that, asks me to authenticate. All right, my thumbprint. So what I really did was just approve that session. My fingerprint was obviously a little sweaty, but I was able to do that. So this is all to show that I was trying trying to simulate a machine that did not belong to me, but I was still able to get into that account that belongs to me without ever having to type in my password. So imagine how powerful this is if you're in the airport situation where you're using a kiosk to just log in to check your email. You don't want to give up your password there.
Okay. So the phone authenticator is the key, is the answer.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
So the authenticator will let you in if you don't have, if you're not.
That's right. Absolutely, yeah. And as you saw, in my case, my fingerprint wasn't working for whatever reason, but it fell back to my PIN, so I could use my PIN to unlock again. So, but the TFA, the two-factor auth promise, was still maintained. Something I have, which is my device, and then the something I am or something I know. Hey.
Hey.
I know you.
How do you log into Skype for Business on your mobile phone?
Very good question. The way we want to make this happen is using Skype. Skype integrates with the authentication libraries that are out there, Microsoft Authentication Library. And actually, I can show you that demo too. But my demo gods haven't been with me, but I'd love to give you that demo. So now I'm going to go through this entire dance on. So this is symbolizing how if an app that uses the right authentication library, and when it has to authenticate, the same flow can actually be kicked off. So once my screen starts showing.
Are you using a certificate or using something else?
Using the same application.
What application?
Authenticator app.
Okay.
Yep. So my phone's not projecting. Oh well, but homework, how about that? Download the Microsoft Authenticator app, set up your Microsoft account, then go to the browser and try logging into your Ignite portal. What will happen is, when you click on sign in with Microsoft, the same exact flow, you'll get a notification on your app, you can go over to the app, authenticate, come back, you're signed in. Same thing with apps.
Is that documentation published?
So the documentation that is published is that as an app developer, you don't have to do anything special to partake in the phone authenticator magic. As long as you're integrated with the right set of authentication libraries, the modern auth libraries, which is documented heavily, and we have a bunch of samples online, that all of this just comes to light automatically.
I don't think you understood. I'm an IT guy, so I want to implement this. I don't want to generate or create an app that uses the Microsoft Authenticator. So is there documentation for how I'm going to deploy that in my enterprise?
The idea is going to be, so the way we are working towards it is, as part of the FIDO consortium, we'll have a standard, and as long as you're developing your application or your equivalent authenticator, according to that, it should intermingle pretty well.
Okay. A final question.
Yes.
You may have already answered this. Does the NT hash get created or stored in a machine when you start using Windows Hello for Business?
No.
No? Okay. Thanks.
So this authenticates against Azure Active Directory, but what about my on-prem AD and then things like...
We're working on bringing that support online too. The first step was really lighting that up for Windows Hello, and we've brought on on-prem support for Windows Hello now, and we're going to keep on at it and bring that same support.
Do you have a rough timeline? Just curious.
I don't think I have a timeline, but we'll be sure to publish it as soon as we have something concrete in place.
Okay.
But the idea, like I said, we know there is a need for having a portable credential that works across the gamut, on-prem, hybrid, as well as in the cloud, not just within the Microsoft ecosystem, but also elsewhere. And that's how we're going to fill that entire jigsaw puzzle of going passwordless. So something we are fully aware and committed and working towards.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, just to follow on to the on-prem AD question.
Yes, sir.
As far as using Windows Hello with on-prem AD,
yes.
ADFS 2016 is required. Can you go into a little bit of detail about how that identity provider works if there's no requirement for Azure AD?
I think the shortest answer is going to be checking out a session that actually dove pretty deep into that exact deployment scheme and all the details. So I'll be more than happy to give you a pointer, and as well as actually put one of my colleagues who's here. So maybe you guys can offline and get the details.
Okay, thanks. All right.
But please check out the What's New in Windows Hello for Business, What's New in 2017. That has all the details of the question that the gentleman asked.
Okay, thanks.
Hi.
Hello. I think the demo guys would be much happier if you offered your favorite pin as a recording and did it very clearly. But in all seriousness, so this is great for like end user management of, in a passwordless world, but what do we do with application identities? So you have to have a application that needs under some sort of identity context. You need to reach out to NAS resources. You have to interface with other systems. And how do you plan on making that transition into a passwordless society? Or is that a different paradigm altogether?
Well, it's one that we have to address. There's no two ways about that. So it kind of goes back to, are you using username and password to really represent your app's identity?
In many cases, yes. I mean, I'd like to not. I mean, obviously, what we can use GMSAs in areas where it's possible. But as you know, I mean, that's a small subset of the areas that require identities, and a lot of homegrown apps and third-party applications off the shelf require a entry of an ID.
Yeah, and we gotta come together to actually address those. I'd be happy to actually talk more about it because again, this is one of those rat hole questions that can keep us going on and on. But how about we do that after this? One last question. Yes, sir.
It'll be really brief. Is there integration with Windows Hello for BitLocker with pre-boot auth?
We don't have that today.
Okay.
There are a couple of, so infrastructurally, it is possible. We have all the right necessary hooks in place, but there's work that perhaps OEMs need to do with us in order to make that pre-boot auth pin flow all the way and get you single sign-on in the post-boot world as well. So infrastructurally, it exists. There are a couple of OEMs that are very interested in lighting that up, and we're working with those guys to make that come to light. But is that something that is, one of the things that has been very interesting and we've been looking at is with this new connected always on devices, people very seldom are actually turning off and rebooting their PCs. So while we were looking at bringing this on fully supported, we found that a large percentage of PCs were never going offline and never going through a reboot part. So which is why things like state separation and data protection under lock and all those forward-looking modern technologies are really where we're focusing our energy on. But to answer your question, it is possible. It just needs integration from the OEM.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yes, sir.
So most of our laptop users are docked, lid closed, with the camera. We don't have fingerprint readers, so what's your recommendation to start adopting the hardware side of things?
Excellent question. So just that I got this right, your workstations don't have cameras or fingerprints, and they're docked, and so they're not mobile. Are these, so the best thing to do in this case, you can go about deploying Windows Hello, because you can still set a PIN, which is really the lowest common denominator in cases where you don't have these specialized hardware to actually light up these experiences. So the recommendation would be to go deploy Windows Hello and choose a PIN complexity that meets your needs. Additionally, if you think that PIN's not sufficient on its own merit, and you want something else there, you could, and this is where some specialized hardware could come in. You could do things like, I need your PIN and proximity of your phone. So we've introduced a new feature in Windows Hello that lets you set up those device unlock policies as well.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Good question. So the gentleman's question was, if I'm using the same setup and using PIN to unlock my PC and get my work done, if I'm actually not connected to the internet, how will I still be able to get into my PC? So we've actually carried forward. So if you are living in the world of domain joined PCs today and you're using, let's say, smart cards or other passwords, we still support cached logon even with Hello. The difference being, of course, when it comes to being able to access any online resources, those are going to require internet connectivity, and the tokens that live have their own life cycle, and they'll need to be refreshed, and that'll require connectivity. But you'll be able to unlock your PC using PIN just fine and access all of your local resources that are stored on that device. Thank you. Yes, sir.
This may be a little tinfoil hat-esque.
Oh, we love it.
And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not positive on this. But in light of recent phone manufacturers coming out with facial recognition and biometric data, there have been discussions on privacy in terms of law enforcement being able to force end users to unlock their data. Has there been any discussion about the possibility? I know you can block things like alternative sign-in options, but have there been discussions about, in a pinch, an end user could potentially block the ability to sign in from any sort of facial recognition or biometric data and only have a PIN access?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We have that even today. If you don't want to set up any of your biometrics, you can choose to just set up your PIN. And fundamentally, and this is something very core to our belief, when it comes to biometrics, we really want users' privacy to be the first principle we go about designing things.
I guess what my question is more so, could I utilize, for example, specifically, I'll utilize the iPhone example. Sure. With the recent iOS 11 update, they implemented they're not calling it a police lock, but that's what tech blogs are touting it as, where you can turn off your biometric information or your biometric, the Touch ID ability at will.
Oh, I see.
So I can use it 95% of the time, but then, and also thinking, so I work for a university, so I have researchers who are traveling around the country.
Yeah.
There may be in a place where they don't necessarily have the,
yeah, sorry, I misinterpreted your question. So currently we don't have the same functionality in place, but something that, if it comes to the foreground, it's something that's absolutely needed, and we have reason to support it. We'll absolutely look into that.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. User trust and instilling it is, again, one of our core values. We want users to feel comfortable using our identity, our products, and so that they're always in control, including their data and the control over it. So just across the board, whichever session you go to that talks about protection, whether it's identity or data, you're going to find how user is in the center of all, and they're in control always.
Thank you.
Welcome. All right, thank you very much, guys. One more session to go, but after that, hopefully a good party. Thank you.